Assalamu alaikum. As Muslims, do we ignore the Quran or do we give the Quran too much respect? Think about that. But now think about this. Do the Shias even open the Quran, or do Shias have an entirely different Quran altogether? Now, to unlock the Quranic mysteries today, I'm joined as always by my brother from another mother, brother Ahmed Abbas. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu rahmatullah. I didn't say it.
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I'm good, bro. I like that. Like that introduction. It's already giving me like a bunch to think about.
Okay.
Some interesting stuff. But we've got a special guest.
We do.
Here to help us get into that topic. Assalamu alaikum, Rashid Haider.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How you guys doing today?
Alhamdulillah,
okay?
Alhamdulillah. How's it going?
Alhamdulillah, all good.
How's respected Sheikh Ayub?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, he's good. He sends his salams.
Wa alaikum salam. We have to give a shout out to Sheikh Ayub. He's been, alhamdulillah, supporting us, supporting the team, and you know, he's always inspiring.
May Allah bless him.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, likewise.
Like father, like son.
We're trying.
that's big shoes to fill, but inshallah you do it. So, bro, to be honest, this is obviously a huge topic. Where do we begin? Because the Holy Quran, we know, of course, the importance of the Holy Quran. It's not even something we should label as important because it's just so evident. It's clear as day. You know, we know, and everyone knows the foundation of our madhab is Hadith Al-Thaqalayn. I leave behind two weighty things, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim as-salam. And it's, in my opinion, these are the answers to salvation and the answers to how to reach Jannah. But of course, in theory is one thing, but in practice it's different, you know. So I want to ask you, kind of like to kick off. Of course, you've been reciting the Quran for how long? Like kind of publicly?
Maybe around 10 years, maybe.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
So what's your kind of perception when you look at it, like from a bird's eye view, in terms of how the community respect or treat the Holy Quran?
Yeah, good question to start off with. To be honest, I think it depends on kind of where you go, what kind of community you're at. Because, you know, I've been to places where, you know, you get there and obviously they're going to start off with the Holy Quran and you've got a nice stage and you've got a nice Quran to go with it, good mic system, etc., etc. And, you know, they put a real importance on the Holy Quran because they know that, you know, someone's going to come and recite and people are going to listen. But then you go to communities where it's like, oh, we're just going to give someone 2-3 minutes to read, quickly finish, and then we'll go on with our event. So I think it kind of depends on where you are in what kind of community, I guess.
Yeah, because some people might say that it's used as like a gap filler. Is it disrespectful? I don't know.
No, I don't think it's disrespectful because you've always having the remembrance of Allah in the background. Now I think it becomes disrespectful when you're not really paying attention to it.
But that's the problem, it's in the background, it's not in the forefront.
Yeah, but you'd rather have that than something else on, to be honest.
Yeah, but we can use that argument with anything. Do you know what I mean? Like if the Quran, if the Holy Quran, the recitation of the Quran is there for a couple of minutes at the beginning of the event just to tick the box, and you know what I mean? Maybe it's not given the importance, or maybe what would be nice is to, for example, a summary of what someone's reciting, because majority of people don't understand what's being read. So something like that maybe gives it...
As in, not as a gap filler in a mosque or something. Okay. I'm talking about maybe driving off to work, things like that. Okay, yeah. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. All right, so this is obviously, like we said, a big topic, but there's so much to get into. But the question you asked at the beginning, say, what do you mean by that? When you said, do we respect it too much or not at all?
Because sometimes, you know, okay, let me say this again. So when I say, do we ignore the Quran? As in, do we just leave it and just open it up in the holy month of Ramadan, for example? And then, for example, when I said, for example, do we give it too much respect? Are we just reading it because we're respecting the Quran, but not knowing what exactly the Quran is talking about? And I think people like Rashid, inshallah, will help us understand the Quran a little bit more. Now, why I say this? Because you don't just respect the Quran. You know what the Quran is saying. There's a difference between that. Because from a young age, you've had Quran instilled inside you. For many, it hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
And we just spoke to a brother recently. He said, I've never opened Quran since I left Arabic school. And that is shocking.
Yeah.
That is shocking to hear. Nothing wrong with it, because I'm pretty sure he's hearing Quran every now and then. But the fact he's not opening the book itself, I think it's
probably
scary.
the reality for many people, you know, and at times we all falter. I spoke to a brother on Saturday. He said to me, he goes, I'm trying to make a niyyah to read 40 ayat a night.
MashaAllah.
And 40 ayat, you think of it, it's like, you know, if he's reading it like at talking speed, then he's probably taking like 3 minutes to do it. But even that, he goes, and this is a guy who's putting in his intention, his efforts to do it. And he's maybe not 3 minutes, but it takes him a while, 5, 10, 15 minutes. He said, even that I'm struggling to do. But that's like the bare minimum we know a hadith is telling us to try and fulfill. But if we're not doing it on a, forget even daily basis, but on a regular basis, maybe there's a gap there. And Rashid, what do you think about this? Because you know that point about respecting the Holy Quran too much.
Yeah.
Do you think some people treat it kind of like a museum ornament? And I want to shout out Qari Imrani Kaki, a good friend of ours, because actually this is a point he made. We sometimes respect it too much to the point where we don't even go near it. We don't touch it. We just sit there, admire it. It's kind of a thing there for protection.
We leave it on the shelf.
We leave it on the shelf.
Gathering dust.
It's beautiful. It's decorated. It's got stands. It's gold. It's sparkly. It's velvet inside and all that. But it's so perfect that we don't go near it.
Yeah, I've seen it. For example, certain places you might go, certain people's houses, you might see a very nice Quran put up on a shelf, and it just stays there. It doesn't move. Someone won't take it and read it.
I've got like a golden box.
This is not you, man.
I have one as well. I'm not gonna lie.
This is not you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have people, for example, just literally put it up, and it's just literally like you said, it's like an ornament. But you know, where you really know when you're struggling or when you haven't read the Quran in a long time is when you pick it up. And my dad always says this to me. He's like, you know, for example, open the Quran, go to any random surah that you haven't read in a long time, and you'll see yourself struggle.
Yeah.
And that's when you know that, you know, hang on a minute, I need to kind of reconnect with the Quran now. I need to get back into it. And like you said, for example, the brother that does 40 ayahs, that might be a lot to some people, it might not be a lot to some people.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
If it's even implementing small things here and there, after Fajr reading Surah Yasin, after Isha reading Surah Waqa'ah, or Surah Amma, for example, after Dhuhr, just small things, but these can have a massive impact.
I mean, different ayats, of course, and different surah have different, like you said, Surah Waqa'ah, for example. We know Surah Waqa'ah has recommended in the time when you need rizq and you need money. Like, and there's so much beauty within the Quran. Whether you're trying to get a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether you're trying to get guidance, whether you're trying to understand history and the stories of the prophets, you know, peace be upon them all. There's an answer for everything in the Quran. There's knowledge there that sometimes you don't even go out and look to find. But maybe we don't understand that, and maybe there's an issue with our upbringing and the way we understand what the Quran is. Because if we're just taught it's a book of stories, you know, qasas, is that the right word? Qasas, plural. Yeah. Like if we're just taught that, and unfortunately sometimes, you know, from a young age, some of our educational systems will teach us about the stories of the prophets. Have you read this surah and this surah? You know, and it's seen as that. And then, you know, when you get to an older age, when you've got that mentality in your mind, you don't see it as a book of learning and guidance and growth and development. You're limited. Imagine if someone, astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh, someone said to you, from tomorrow you can never listen to do with anything about the Ahlul Bayt in Islam. Or if someone said to you, you can't talk about the Ahlul Bayt, or you can't listen to a lecture about the Ahlul Bayt, you'd be like, I'm done. This religion's not for me if I can't do that. So why do we feel comfortable with not engaging with the Quran? But, you know, when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt in Islam, that's a red line. You know what I mean? We should be known as the madhab, as the sect of the Quran. You know, people see us as the sect of the Ahlul Bayt because that's what we have to do to differentiate ourselves. We have love for the Ahlul Bayt. Well, why can't we be known for our love for the Holy Quran?
No, you're absolutely right, Ahmed, because, you know, being from the school of Ahlul Bayt, alhamdulillah, we are blessed to be on this path. And going back to the Hadith Al-Thaqalayn you mentioned earlier, where Rasulullah said, إِنِّي تَارَكْ فِيكُمْ الثَّقَلَيْن كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعَتْرَتِ I leave behind you two weighty things, the Quran and my Ahlul Bayt. And if you hold on to them, you would never go astray. So that just goes to show that the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt go hand in hand. So we need to give them both the importance that they deserve. And you know, Rashid, you're a reciter.
Yeah.
So you recite, mashallah, you go all the way from the Quran to Adhan, from Mawalid and Ashid to eulogies. So you are like the full package, as well as
one-man majlis.
Yeah. So even to go as far as ziyaras and ad'iyah, mashallah. So you have the best of both worlds. A Quranic reciter and a reciter that remembers the eulogies and also reciting celebration of the Ahlul Bayt. Do you feel any difference when you go to centers when it's time to recite for the Ahlul Bayt and when it's the Quranic recitation? How's the crowd?
Yeah. It's a good question because I've been to places where, for example, when we start the Quran, we start at the beginning of the program, and you look around the hall and you maybe see 5-6 people. or even maybe a little bit more. Some are on their phones, some are just chatting or not really listening. Other people might be listening, but what I'm trying to say is that there's not really any attention, for example, when someone's reciting the
I've
whole
seen
Quran.
centers actually give chai during Quran.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what's crazy as well? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But your, mashallah, your voice is like amazing, mashallah. And if that's what you're finding, when most people would be starstruck listening to you.
I found his voice for Quran.
Yeah, same.
I didn't
the first
even
time,
know
yeah,
you recite.
Yeah.
And stuff.
But if that's how you find it, when you've got such a nice voice, mashallah, imagine those who are not professionals or maybe are reciting for the first or second time in public, they must be finding the response from the crowd even worse and then, not really feeling it.
Yeah, some might be even put off.
Yeah.
I've had some people say to me, for example, I read at X place and no one paid attention to me, so
What's the point?
I'm not really interested no more, kind of thing. And it's a bit sad that, people have to think like that when, again, like you said, there's so much importance of the Holy Quran. But again, like you said, moving on to, for example, eulogies, your recite al-Atmiyah, the hall's full, packed.
Yeah.
You'll see so many people, everyone listening, reciting back with you. But if only it was that same thing when it's reading Quran. And I think it's all about finding that balance, as you said. They go hand in hand.
So who's to blame? Is it the center? Is it parents? Or is it ourselves?
Such a laid question, isn't it? But there's probably so many truths behind it because, of course, if you look at, for example, the Ahl Sunnah, they are Muslims, we are Muslims. We're born in the UK, for example, they're born in the UK. We go to the same secular schools. We both have, for example, weekend Sunday schools or Saturday schools or whatever. Both schools teach Quran. One madhab is known for the recitation of the Holy Quran, and one is known not to have the same degree of importance or status or quality when reciting the Holy Quran. So it could be a case where our educational systems maybe aren't focusing enough. It could be a case where with parenting, for example, where we put more importance on Muharram, and this, to be honest, let's be real, as Shias, because we're so emotional and passionate about things like Muharram, we end up making that our religion and forgetting the wholesome and the holistic message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is in the Holy Quran and within the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Do you get what I'm saying? So we're drawn to people sometimes more than we are to text. So I think there's like a establishment.
We're drawn to the walking and talking Quran.
Yeah. It's true.
And Amir al-Mu'mineen, yeah.
Ahsant. But but ultimately, look, I'll be honest, it's down to us. When we go Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to say, why did you not read the Quran? And I'm in my 20s and I'm having a normal Thursday, for example, and I'm like, oh yeah, when I was young, my madrasa didn't teach me the Quran. It's not going to suffice, to be honest. You should and can, and we can pick up the Quran at any time, at any place.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned, our brothers from other schools of thought.
Yeah.
They prioritize more on the reciting of the Quran, for example. And I've seen them, mashallah, they do a lot of memorizing the Quran.
Yeah.
So their kids from a very, very young age, they're going weekly.
Yes.
In a year or two, they've pretty much memorized almost the entire Quran, mashallah.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't say they put more priority to the Quran than us.
But
why?
The impression of that is that...
Why? I just think their numbers are higher. If there is more
maybe.
In fact, I think about 70% are non-Shia. Of course, they're going to say they recite more Quran than us.
Yeah, but let's be completely honest, Sayed. Let me be honest with you. If we talk about the general, let's say like the circle of our community or our age group, someone's driving in the car, some people would rather play Basim Karbala'i than, for example, play Surah Rahman, for example. And the reality is such, maybe it's because you're attached to the poetry and, you love the reciter and so on. But at the same time, maybe it's a lack of understanding as to what the surah can give you or what the Holy Quran can do for us and do for you. And maybe that's why, rather than I prefer one over the other. But then that comes back to our understanding of the Quran. Do we understand what it's for, what its use is, what benefit we can gain from it? Because at the end of the day, the Quran doesn't gain from us to recite.
Yeah.
We gain from the Quran.
It. Yeah. I think saying that, like, I've seen times where, for example, if someone has an issue, someone has a problem, something's going wrong in someone's life, that's when they turn back to the Quran. But all this time where, alhamdulillah, everything's going well, it shouldn't be a thing where if something's going wrong in one's life that we should be turning back to the Quran. The Quran should always be there. It should always be a thing that we open, that we read, that we turn to.
No, you're right. And you mentioned a very important point. where you said people only turn to in times of need, for example. And I've seen it happen. People will only recite, for example, Ayat al-Kursi when they're traveling, because they want safety, for example. Or you mentioned earlier they recite Surah Al-Waqi'ah for rizq, for example.
Even that, like, not many people. Surah Yasin when there's a death, Surah Rahman when there's a marriage. Like,
Do you
know what I mean?
So we only use the Quran when we think it's beneficial to us only. But whereas Quran is beneficial to everything.
Yeah.
Our whole life, to be honest. Because you mentioned the Quran is stories, and I forgot that Quran were actually stories. When I was young, I used to go to Arabic school.
Yeah.
And for example, we have Surah Al-Fil, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Al-Ikhlas, all these chapters from Juz' Amma. I would learn all the stories one by one, and we would understand Juz' Amma in its entirety.
MashaAllah.
And it's a story for everyone. But growing up, it's all about, for example, as you said, we'll only hear in the majlis for about 2-3 minutes, or for example, only in the times of need. But if that continued from childhood to your teenage years, even towards your adulthood, that would be amazing. And I remember centers growing up. My center, Rasul A'zam, Center Rasul A'zam, I think they deserve a shout out here. When I was young, every Tuesday, every Thursday, and some Fridays, before the main majlis, we'll have a Quran teacher, and we'll have about, I think, almost 20 kids.
MashaAllah.
We sit around and we'll recite the noble Quran, and they'll correct our mistakes. They'll fix our pronunciations, and it will all be with community support. And what was so beautiful about it, every time there was like a Mawlid event, they would hold like an award ceremony for us.
Yeah.
So they'll give us prizes, like, fake guns and stuff like this for reciting the Quran. And there was encouragement, and we would be proud and recognized in front of our fathers and mothers that we read Quran. But that ended as soon as you left, you go into your teenage years. I think the community.
But the fact that we remember stories like that, I remember graduation from what we call the small Quran, the learning Quran, to the normal Quran, and it was a big deal. Everyone wearing suits. You get a gift. They give you an envelope of money. Back in the day, basically, like, it was a proper encouragement, mashallah. But
I don't see that happening.
It doesn't. I don't. Well, maybe it does, but I don't know, to be honest, because we're past that. But at least we know for us.
And it used to be free back in the day, by the way. And I think
what
that
was free?
Quran lessons, for example.
Really?
I'm not saying you shouldn't charge for Quran lessons. That's someone given their time and profession. But because it was free, I think every parent should send their kids. But now there's money involved. What's more important?
Yeah, but bro, we have YouTube, for example. We've got everything there. And even, to be honest, a lot of the centers still do Quran circles and stuff like that. Forget even for the kids. For us, we talked about the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Yeah. Firstly, how can we understand the Ahlul Bayt and what they stood for if we don't understand the Quran? How can we prove Wilayat Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam if we don't understand the verses in the Quran which prove the Wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen? We know, for example, Ati Allah wa Ati Rasul wa ulil amr minkum. We know that this verse, for example, is specific to Amir al-Mu'mineen from our tafasir. And we know there's so many other verses about Ghadir and about Tatir and so on and so forth. That is in many ways a foundation and a proof and a guidance to understand our religion better. And vice versa, we use our Ahlul Bayt and Islam to understand the Quran better. So it does not make sense if I claim to be like a die-hard Shia Muslim because I beat my chest for the Ahlul Bayt and I do the loudest Nara Haydari for the Ahlul Bayt. And I go to all the Wiladat and the Shahadat and all that stuff, but I have no attachment to the Holy Quran. It doesn't add up. You can't have one without the other. It's like having rain without clouds. It doesn't make sense.
So how do we improve our relationship with the Quran?
That's
What's
not
like
a question
the solution?
That's a question for
maybe
Mulla
Rashid.
Rashid.
Because you started this from what age?
Probably around 4 or 5 years old.
MashaAllah.
I think one thing that helped me was being in that environment, just constantly listening to Quran. Even if you're not reading it, for example, but at least if you're just sitting there and listening to it and being in the environment where you just keep constantly hearing it, that helps you to get close to the Quran. And then also, for example, things like you mentioned earlier.
Do you mean at home, by the way, when you?
Yes, at home. Yeah, but obviously, like, saving up, I'm just sitting down, not doing anything. Just play the Quran.
Yeah. It's such a nice
simple
feeling.
as that. Literally, just play the Quran. And then obviously, for example, Quran circles, as you mentioned, you could have a bunch of people who haven't read the Quran in a long time. It might be a bit rusty, but they will be able to get through, and it will be able to help everyone to be able to recite the Quran. Also, reaching out to teachers, for example, just reconnecting with the Quran. I think that's the most important thing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You and me and our origins are not native Arabic speakers, okay? So for a lot of our communities, there's nervousness about reciting the Holy Quran. My makhraj, my pronunciation might be bad.
Even me.
Yeah, I mean that might be true, to be honest, because I have a lot of friends.
The Quran is one thing, you don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah, and pressure must be higher as well, because if you're a native Arab, you know. But what would you say to someone if they said to you, I have a friend who told me, like, probably a week or two back, you know, he's in his mid-late 20s and he's an Asian, and he said to me, he goes, I don't feel like I can recite Quran publicly because firstly my pronunciation is bad, is what he said, and secondly, from a young age I didn't give it time, or I wasn't put in an environment where I was reciting Quran regularly. Yeah. Now I feel like it's too late. I'm 28, 29 years old and I don't have an option. So what would you say to someone if they said that to you?
Firstly, I don't think it's too late. I think, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 50, you could be 20, you could be 10. As soon as, for example, you have someone there to help you and to guide you to learn, for example, the rulings of the Quran, how to recite the Quran. For example, if you want to go far as learning melodies of the Holy Quran, you can do that. But essentially, you need to, I think the biggest thing for someone who isn't confident or doesn't know as much when it comes to, for example, the rulings of the Quran, is to get yourself a teacher, a mentor, someone that knows the Quran and can help you and teach you and go through it with you. Because that's literally how all of us learn. You know, we had someone there who taught us, who went through it with us. We made mistakes, but you fix those mistakes, you continue. And that's one way. And I actually know someone who was in the exact same situation.
Really?
He wasn't reciting Quran. He didn't really pay much attention to it. And I think we can say, obviously, we don't pay much attention. But I think we were having a discussion about this earlier, Sayed, where you can always come back to the Quran. And the Quran will come back to you.
SubhanAllah.
Kind of thing. So if we go to the Quran, it will come back to us and we can be able to...
I've got a question.
Yeah.
What was your earliest memory of the Quran? Your earliest memory?
My earliest memory would probably be... I was sitting down in the sitting room. It was me and my mum. We were just sitting having a little chat, and then she was like, come over. She was like, bring the Quran with you. We sat there, Juz Amma, started reading. I made a few mistakes. She corrected me.
MashaAllah.
And that's something, for example, I used to do a lot with my mum, with my dad, with many teachers. Likewise. And yeah, that was one of my earliest memories when it comes to the Quran.
I think a lot of us were blessed with that, you know.
It goes to show the importance of parents, the role they play.
Yeah, it really does. You know, for me, my grandmother was my teacher, and mashallah, she's been teaching Quran to classes for years.
MashaAllah.
So at home, there was no slacking, basically, from a young age, mashallah, and it was nice. We used to have it was so sweet. I was probably like, I remember 3-4 years old. We used to have fruit parties. She used to call them fruit parties. Yeah, honestly, because it was in her bedroom in my first house growing up, and she used to call it like a fruit party. So she would incentivize us. She said, look, we're gonna have different fruits and we'll kind of like chill out, but you got to do half an hour of Quran with me at a young age. So we're doing the alphabet and we're doing Fatah, Kasra, all that stuff. It's really nice, and I think that goes to show as parents, for many of us who are parents to young children, no matter how young, you know, there's always an opportunity. And even from the youngest of ages, your children can pick up on the melodies of the Holy Quran, on the pronunciations and these things. When they're learning language, 1 or 2 years old, it will become embedded in them, and their vocabulary and, you know, their voice box will get used to these kind of things. It's really important.
It is. And I remember, speaking of memories now, just remember this now. I think I was like 5, and I have one sister elder than me. She's 1 year gap difference, so she was 6, I think, at the time. And the person that was teaching us Quran at home wasn't my mum or dad, by the way. It was one of my sisters.
MashaAllah.
And I think she was maybe, 14 or 15 at that time. I just remembered that now.
MashaAllah.
SubhanAllah. May Allah bless her. She's listening to the podcast.
Parents, grandparents. Yeah, it's responsible. And to be honest, like everyone at home, if you're a parent or anything, first thing you got to do is subscribe to After Maghrib before anything. And second thing you got to do is teach your kids the Quran. That's the most important thing, inshallah. Rashid, I want to ask you something else. Okay.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Quran and like how we can gain from the Quran. Okay. Yeah. So we know we go home. Let's say I have an issue on my mind. I pray my salah. I go into sujood. I talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the Quran is a way of Allah talking to us.
Yeah.
It's the only form of communication that is directly, visibly, tangibly there between Allah and us. You know, how can you kind of put it into words or express it to us? about how the Quran is so special to you in the way that Allah talks to you or the way that you've seen it talk to people. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's more than just opening the Quran and reading the Quran. I think, for example, going into reading the translation of the Quran as well at the same time. If you open certain surahs, they have certain stories. Or, for example, if you're going through a certain thing, the Quran might teach you, for example, how to go through that certain thing. So I think it goes hand in hand with reciting the Quran, but also learning the translation of what you're reading, because that could also have an impact on you.
Ahsan Rashid, that's so amazing and inspiring for everyone, if I'm honest. And I have maybe it's not, you won't get any money from this, but it's $1 million question. I like to use this phrase, $1 million question. As someone who struggles to open the Quran every single day, I'm not as blessed as you when it comes to the Quranic recitations. How can I, let's say I'm an amateur when it comes to Quran, for example, how can I improve my relationship with the Quran? Any tips or tricks?
I think
Secrets?
I think it's probably just related back to what I said earlier about being in an environment of Quran. So, like, for example, earlier, I know you said, for example, we get in the car and we play Basim straight away.
Yeah.
I've done this before.
I play Rashid Haider.
We've all done this before. Instead of playing Basim...
I'm joking. Sorry, go ahead.
Instead of playing Basim, why don't we play the Quran? Or, for example, it might be in the morning, you wake up, you have a few minutes here and there. And I mean, at the same time, how can we say that? Do we really have time for the Quran? Are you telling me that we don't have 5-10 minutes in our day where we can't, for example, it's on our phone quickly, let's go to X surah, let's recite a few verses, just to kind of get closer to the Quran. And as time goes on, you'll find it easier to recite the Quran because you're doing more practice. So that will in itself make you love the Quran more.
And there's also loads of answers in the Quran. Like, how many times have we thought about something and we're wondering, like, what does Islam say about this? Or what happened in this part of Islamic history or something like that? And we just search it. And we search it with the word Quran. I guarantee you there's an answer there. Not just that, for example, it could be,
I've done that many times. What does the Quran say about this?
Yes, example? Exactly. You know what's interesting as well? On my way...
Thanks, Google.
There you go. We owe a big one to you. Like, it's interesting. I was thinking about this a few days ago. I was thinking about a situation which is tough. I didn't really want to get into it. I was thinking, like, is it the right thing for me? This is a difficult decision or whatever. And I opened the Holy Quran and it directed me basically to a part. Well, it wasn't the verse I opened, but... As in, is this an istikhara? No. Okay, I was just basically reading the Quran, and also I was doing research online, and I found the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we talked about actually in last week's podcast as well. I think it was last week's, when Surah Al-Baqarah, if I'm not mistaken, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and he's talking about jihad in that verse. But he's saying you may love something and it's not good for you, or you don't love something and it's good for you and you don't know it.
Jihad al-nafs, you mean?
Jihad al-nafs.
Yeah, you mentioned this,
Jihad al-nafs. And it's relevant to our date. And I told you, like, I was going through something and that verse came to me. There's life lessons in the Quran. The biggest self-development book we can read, Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends, Influence, all these, like, do you know what I mean? Business-minded, motivational books. Bro, why are we reading that stuff when we got the Holy Quran? If you're looking for inspirational stories or self-development or how to achieve your goals or how to attain perfection in the eyes of God and so on and so forth, everything's there. Like, if I'm busy because I'm working, like, long hours and I'm focused on my work, then the Quran can support that. It can, if anything, supplement it and improve it. If I'm focused on my kids so I've got no time, where else can I go if I haven't got the Quran? We're happy to quote about hadith about raising kids. We're happy to quote stories about the imams, how they used to have jobs. But when it comes to the Quran, we don't find relevant examples.
Yallah, at least we're finding some relevance.
Yeah, but that's 50%, yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But, there must be...
we can improve ourselves, for sure. For sure.
All of us.
Myself, yourself, everyone listening.
And there's nothing wrong, like you said, about playing Mulla Abbas in the car, playing Mulla Rashid in the car. Like, it's a good thing. Like, on the way somewhere, listen to your Quran. On the way back, listen to your
Latan. We know the value and the importance of the Quran. And we find it a struggle, Rashid. The fact we find it a struggle...
I have the same thing as well.
It proves to you how shaitan overpowers us. Because I don't think we choose to ignore the Quran or not recite every day, for example. I think there's satanic whispers behind this.
Yeah, honestly. And I think we've got to change our mindset about it. Or we have to, if I'm running an event in my community, for example, I should try and give more attention to the Quran. quote it ask the speaker to quote it in his lectures. If someone's reciting Quran in the beginning, maybe summarize it before and after. You know, things like that.
And I think communities also should maybe try and do more when it comes to Quran. Obviously, these things are good that we've mentioned, but for example, hosting events for Quran.
Yeah, competitions.
Exactly, like competitions. That's one way that's brought many people together.
Yeah.
To love the Quran even more. You know, forget even the incentives or what you might win. Just in general, people are coming together and they're reciting Quran and they're enjoying it.
Probably speaking of competitions, there was a recent competition last year, and that made me fall in love with Quran. Honest to God.
MashaAllah.
Honest to God. Yani, apart from majalis, funerals, whatever it is, Ramadan, that was one time where I enjoyed hearing the Quran. You know, seeing the melodies, the maqamats, and I was like, MashaAllah, I myself back in the day thought not a lot of Shia recite Quran, but the fact I was hearing non-stop Shias reciting the Quran, it blew my mind. And that was something I was proud of to see.
Yeah, subscribe to After Maghrib. You get more. I'm going to try and make that a thing. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to lie, I've been listening to podcasts, it's so funny. It's like someone will say something random and they'll be like, yeah, smash the like button. Yeah. And I'm thinking like, do you know what? I think we should start doing that more. So guys, if you're watching, smash the like button. If you like what Sayed Ali says, smash the like button. Anything to add, guys, before we wrap up?
There is one thing I want to hear before we wrap up.
Yeah.
It's a verse or two by Rashid.
Ahsant.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير.
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. That was beautiful. You needed no echo. You needed no sound system. I know you mentioned that earlier, but this was. It gave me peace.
Honestly,
I felt
honestly, mashallah. And you know what, Mulla Rashid, we're blessed to have you. You know, we listen to you a lot, and we're blessed. And for those who don't know in the audience, you can see a lot of Mulla Rashid's work. We call him Mulla and Qari, mashallah, because he does both recitations in different languages and obviously the Holy Quran on YouTube. We can find you anywhere else where you can Instagram. What's your handle?
Rashid Haider 1.
Beautiful, mashallah.
Is there Rashid Haider 2?
Who's number 2?
What's the reason of one? Someone took the handle?
Do you know what it is? I just put the name. Someone asked me that before. I don't have an answer, if I'm being honest. But no, thank you guys for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure.
To be in this chair that I've seen on YouTube many times. And yeah, great work. Keep the work up.
Well, thanks for blessing us. It's been actually inspiring, and it's a reminder to me of the importance of the Quran, to myself, and inshallah everyone listening.
Ahsan. Inshallah we can all make hajat for Mulla Rashid and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless his parents, his teachers, anyone who's
May
supported
Allah
him.
grant you a noble wife.
Inshallah. Ilahi ameen ya Rabbil Alamin. This is Sayyid Ali's favourite quote at the moment. Smash that like button.
I encourage marriage every
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely, guys. Take care, inshallah. We'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.